So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Star Wars. So let's start the series. The air, thick with the acrid scent of ash, the metallic tang of burnt chakra, and the ghosts of fallen comrades, clung to Naruto Uzumaki like a second skin. The silence was a heavy shroud. Craters, some of which were still faintly smoking, pockmarked the earth like weeping wounds, silent witnesses to the cataclysm that had unfolded. Ruined structures, once proud testaments to a vibrant civilization, stood like broken teeth against a bruised, almost mournful sky. He was a walking testament to a war that had demanded everything, leaving him with nothing but the chilling solitude of victory, a victory that felt more like a profound, soul-deep defeat. He stood alone, the last flickering ember of a fire that had consumed everything, the weight of the world and the crushing finality of its end, pressed down on him, a physical ache in his chest that went deeper than any wound, his once bright blue eyes hollowed by grief, and his once bright blonde hair matted with grime and the residue of 1,000 battles. However, that power now felt like a cruel mockery, a constant, burning reminder of what he had failed to protect, his friends, his teachers, the very fabric of his world, all gone. He was powerful, yes, the result of years of unrelenting training, the raw energy of the Nine Tails coiled within him, a dormant volcano of power. The residual power of the Fourth Great Shinobi War still hummed beneath his skin, a silent testament to the strength that had ultimately proved futile against the tide of destruction. The memories, sharp and agonizing, were a constant barrage, a silent scream echoing in the emptiness of his heart. He saw the shattered remnants of the Hokage monument, the faces of the former leaders of the Hidden Leaf now scarred and broken, a poignant symbol of the destruction that had even reached the heart of his village, and he stumbled through the wreckage, his feet dragging through the debris of a world that was no more. Each step was a painful reminder of a face he would never see again, or a laugh he would never hear. Then, amid the wreckage of his past, it emerged, devoid of the recognizable hand seals, chakra signatures, or telltale marks of a jutsu. This wasn't the menacing shimmer of a space-time ninjutsu, nor the swirling vortex of a kamui, a tear in the sky that glistened with an odd, iridescent light, pulsed and writhed like a living wound in the fabric of reality, a chaotic swirl of energy that defied all known laws of nature. From the anomaly, a low, humming sound that sounded like the grinding of impossible gears and grew louder until it reverberated in his bones as well as his ears. It wasn't a jutsu, it wasn't something he recognized from the vast library of techniques he had encountered, it was wrong, fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong. It felt alien, like a piece of the universe that had been forced open against its will, and Naruto stopped, his tired mind straining to process the impossible. He felt a dizzying disorientation, a sickening sense of being stretched and pulled in multiple directions at once, as if his essence was being unraveled. The rift started to widen, its edges crackling with distorted light and spitting out tendrils of raw energy. A strong, invisible force emanated from it, a pull that tugged at his very being, at the very core of his chakra. In an attempt to resist, he braced himself, his feet digging into the ruined earth, the remnants of his chakra flaring in a desperate attempt to ground himself. However, the anomaly's raw, cosmic power was greater than his strength, which had been refined over years of battle and by the power of a tailed beast. His heart's desolation and his spirit's emptiness left him vulnerable, like a leaf caught in an unstoppable storm or a ship without an anchor in a cosmic tide. The split engulfed him with a last, excruciating rush. A dazzling burst of white light and a thunderous roar smothered the cries of his memories, and then, nothing. The cold logic of science was bent towards the grim purpose of war, shielded from the harsh surface environment and the prying eyes of any lingering Republic patrols. The sterile, artificially lit air hummed with the low thrum of advanced separatist machinery. Deep within a repurposed, fortified underground complex carved into the crystalline depths of Megiddo, far from the surface scars of the recent conflict, lay a hub of technological innovation. Here, separatist scientists, driven by ambition and the promise of power, focused on developing weapons that would crush the Republic and secure separatist dominance across the galaxy. A group of separatist scientists, dressed in clean white lab coats that provided a sharp contrast to the chaotic energy they were trying to control, bustled around a massive, complex device in a large cylindrical chamber. Wires slithered across the floor like metallic vines, monitors showed complex energy readings in glowing Orbesh script, and the air crackled with contained power, the faint smell of lubricants mingling with a pervasive undercurrent of fear. At the front of the operation was Dr. Vex, a gaunt human with sharp features, eyes that had a calculating glint, and an air of cold, intellectual superiority that verged on arrogance. A stern-faced tactical droid, its optical sensors glowing red, stood near the entrance, silently enforcing the facility's strict protocols. "The primary containment field is holding," Commander TD-17 reports. "No anomalies in orbital or ground sensor sweeps," said a tense-looking technician, his eyes fixed on a luminous console with shifting data. "Energy levels are stabilizing, Doctor," he said. "Excellent, the dimensional transfer protocols are initiated. We are on the cusp of a breakthrough that will change the course of this war. Imagine, Technician Gel, access to energies and technologies from other realities. Resources the Republic cannot even conceive of." Vex nodded, his eyes darting to the tactical droid before he silently acknowledged the significance of their secrecy on this far-off world. They were convinced that they were the masters of the universe, able to bend reality to their will and extract secrets from the very fabric of existence, safe within the hidden depths of Megiddo. Their confidence was evident, a thick layer of arrogance built upon years of successful, albeit morally dubious, experimentation with exotic energies and forbidden technologies. Lights flickered erratically throughout the chamber, creating dancing shadows across the scientists' faces. Alarms blared, a cacophony of digital warnings in a language foreign to Naruto but universally recognized as a signal of danger, and suddenly the machine started to whine, the sound rising from a low hum to a shrill, piercing shriek that irritated the nerves. Vex exclaimed, "What's happening?" as his calm crumbled beneath the unexpected barrage of pandemonium. His slender smile disappeared, replaced by an alarmed expression. "The dimensional barrier is destabilizing. We're exceeding predicted energy thresholds," exclaimed Gel, the technician, as his fingers flew across the console in a desperate attempt to recover control. "Energy fluctuations are off the charts. Warning, unforeseen energy signature detected within the containment field, origin point unknown," said Commander TD-17 in a synthesized voice that broke through the panic. It pulsated with an unnatural light, a distortion in the air that seemed to hum with malevolent intent, and a tear appeared in the center of the chamber, a shimmering, unstable portal that mirrored the one Naruto had been pulled into. However, this one felt artificial, charged with the cold, sterile energy of technology rather than the raw, untamed power of nature. "But, the readings are anomalous, the energy signature, it's unlike anything we predicted. Something is coming through, but not in the way we anticipated," Vex cried, his eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and terror. "It's working." The rift burst before he could go into further detail or the scientists had had time to properly comprehend the significance of the readings. The impact was tremendous, a shockwave of raw power that sent the scientists reeling and caused equipment to explode in showers of sparks and acrid smoke. Security droids stationed around the chamber were thrown off their feet, their metallic forms clattering against the floor. A figure was violently ejected from the swirling energy with a deafening crack that shook the very foundations of the underground complex, sending dust and crystalline debris raining down from the ceiling. A dark, stylized mask, covering the upper half of their face, obscured their features, leaving only the glint of eyes visible through narrow slits. Two short, curved blades, the color of polished steel but emitting a strange, subtle glow, were held in a ready stance, their tips nearly touching the floor. The figure landed in a low crouch, their forms silhouetted against the dying, chaotic light of the rift, which began to shrink and flicker out. Naruto. The air was different, thinner, and carried strange scents of ozone and something metallic. The sounds were a startling combination of strange noises, including the constant hum of machinery, the blaring of alarms, the terrified cries of the scientists, and the cold, synthesized pronouncements of the tactical droid. His mind, still suffering from the loss of his world and the deep emptiness in his heart, found it difficult to make sense of this new, strange reality. Security droids, their optical sensors glowing a threatening red, moved on him with their blaster guns leveled, their servomotors a harsh counterpoint to the dying alarms, and mechanical clicks reverberated through the room before he could even completely recognize his surroundings. The droids sounded an impersonal, manufactured voice, terminate with extreme prejudice. Intruder alert. Because he was in immediate, physical danger and wasn't in a place to study or examine the foreign words or the metallic attackers, Naruto's instincts, honed by a lifetime of warfare, the constant threat of death, and the need to survive, took over. He moved with the raw, explosive power of a predator, a ninja who had faced down gods, rather than the elegant, almost ethereal movements of a Jedi, guided by the subtle energies of the Force. He was a blur of black and red, slicing through the hail of crimson blaster fire with unfathomable speed, the crackle of energy bolts missing him by inches. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. Naruto roared with a guttural roar that was more pain than rage. He made a quick hand seal, a burst of raw chakra erupting from his mouth as he bellowed, a huge sphere of crimson flame, far larger and hotter than any plasma bolt, surged forward, engulfing a line of advancing battle droids. Their metallic forms glowed red-hot for a moment before melting into slag, the air filled with the sharp stench of burning metal. Shuriken, spinning with deadly accuracy, embedded themselves in the optical sensors and joints of several droids, causing them to seize and fall. He blurred forward, a handful of sharp metal discs flashing from his hand, his ninjato, imbued with the subtle energy of chakra metal, a material unknown in this galaxy, sliced through their metallic limbs with ease, sparks flying with each strike. As more droids moved forward, Naruto reached into a pouch and took out a few small paper talismans. He then dispersed them among the metallic attackers with a flick of his wrist. A moment later, the exploding tags detonated with a series of sharp cracks and flashes of light. Shrapnel tore through the droids, sending limbs and components flying. The blast's concussive force sent ripples through the chamber, further confusing the remaining droids and the frightened scientists. Next, he threw a weighted kunai on a thin, nearly undetectable wire and hooked it onto a metal beam above. With a sharp tug, he pulled himself up and swung over a barrage of blaster fire. From there, he unleashed another technique, wind style, great breakthrough. A strong wind gust as sharp as razor blades ripped through the remaining droids, sending them tumbling across the chamber, their parts flying everywhere like abandoned toys. As a few remaining droids tried to reassemble, their blaster rifles spitting crimson energy, Naruto channeled chakra into his fist, surrounded by a crackle of blue lightning. Lightning style, lariat. He charged, his chakra-enhanced punch slamming into a B2 super battle droid, the electrical energy overloading its systems with a deafening pop and a shower of sparks. The scientists, their faces twisted in fear, scurried for cover as the sounds of crashing metal, shattering components, the roar of elemental energy, the sharp thwack of thrown weapons, and the startling cracks of explosions filled the air. They had expected a controlled experiment, a calculated breach of dimensions, and they had expected to observe, study, and possibly even capture whatever came through. However, they had not expected this force of destruction, with the icy, cutting edge of fear taking the place of vexed scientific curiosity. He screamed, "Stop him! Activate the containment field! Now!" Commander TD-17 said, executing containment protocol, while lifting a metallic arm. His grief and rage, which had been suppressed for so long, as well as the raw pain of being the last, found a brutal, cathartic outlet in this abrupt, violent confrontation. Naruto was a tornado of destruction, a force of nature unleashed in a sterile, artificial environment. He didn't understand their words, their panicked cries, or the strange sounds they made. All he understood was the threat, the attack, and the need to survive. He approached the scientists, his eyes shining through the mask slits with a ferocity that foretold suffering, vengeance, and a valiant struggle for existence. As he fumbled with a control panel, perspiration trickling down his brow, one scientist said, "He's too fast. The droids can't keep up. Contact Count Dooku." Vex said, his voice shaking, his normal poise gone, "Report the success. The rift worked. But, report the anomaly. He's not what we expected." A flickering blue hologram of Count Dooku appeared in the corner of the room, his normally calm expression replaced with one of detached interest, his elegant features framed by the chaotic energy of the chamber. As Naruto closed in, moving with terrifying speed and precision, one of the scientists, his face pale and sweating with fear, managed to activate a comm system. The comm unit echoed Dooku's smooth, resonant voice, "Report, Doctor," which even in this chaotic time carried an aura of authority. With his eyes bouncing wildly between his leader's flickering hologram and Naruto's approaching form, who moved like a shadow of death, the scientist muttered, "Count, it worked. The dimensional breach was successful. We have brought something through," he said. However, the noises of the continuous carnage grew louder before he could go into further detail or describe the nature of the anomaly. The clang of metal on metal, the crackle of energy weapons overloading, the whoosh of displaced air, the crackle of electricity, the sharp cracks of explosions, and a raw, guttural scream ripped through the air, containing the anguish of loss, the rage of a cornered beast, and the desperate will to survive. The scientist's eyes widened in fear as Naruto arrived and lifted him off the ground with ease while holding onto the front of his lab coat. A final, desperate cry that was cut short and followed by a sickening thud reverberated through the communication link, marking a terrible conclusion to the scientist's report. The hologram flickered wildly, the picture of Dooku warped by the chaotic energy emanating from the dying rift and the ongoing conflict. Then there was quiet. Commander TD-17, its metallic form sparking, lay slumped against a console, its optical sensors dark. The scientists, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and disbelief, were still and silent, their lives extinguished in a brutal, swift onslaught, Naruto stood amid the debris of broken droids and overturned equipment in the Separatist lab. While deactivated droids lay in twisted heaps, their optical sensors dark and lifeless. With the faint glow from the blades fading, Naruto lowered his ninjato. The silence that returned was different from the one he had left behind. It was replete with the sound of violence, the metallic tang of oil spills, the strange odor of alien technology, and the weight of his own deeds. His face, streaked with dirt, perspiration, and a single silent tear, was a mask of confusion, profound isolation, and a deep, lingering pain. His blue eyes, no longer hollowed out by grief but burning with a desperate uncertainty, scanned the alien technology, the strange symbols on the consoles, incomprehensible to him, the strange architecture of the facility, and he removed his mask, letting it clatter to the floor as a symbol of the fight that had just ended. He was completely alone, adrift in a sea of the unknown, a castaway in a galaxy he never knew existed, and he had no idea where he was, what had happened, or what these strange beings, these metallic attackers, and the terrified things had wanted. The sounds he had heard and the words they had spoken were meaningless, a jumble of alien noise. In stark contrast to the fiery end of his own world, the cold of Maijito seeped into his bones as he walked towards a broken viewport, the transparisteel still raining down in glittering shards. He gazed out at the strange, fractured crystalline formations, the unfamiliar sky painted with the hues of an unknown sunset, and the strange, unfamiliar landscape. The weight of his loss and the crushing load of being the last were now made worse by the dreadful uncertainty of his new reality. He had survived the end of his world, the cataclysm that had claimed everyone he loved, only to be thrown into another, equally confusing reality. Was there another chance? An unexpected turn of events that provided a fresh start? Or had he just vanished, a remnant of a vanished world, destined to roam alone on a frigid, ruined earth? Naruto stood there, a lone figure against the backdrop of a universe that knew nothing of him, and he, of it, knew that his journey had just begun, a journey into the heart of a galaxy far, far away, where the echoes of his past would collide with the destiny of a new world, a world embroiled in its own devastating conflict. The unknown sun, a different color than the one he knew, a pale, icy white against a sky streaked with deep blues and purples, started to set, casting long, unsettling shadows across the crystalline landscape. A mixture of relief and exhaustion pervaded the air aboard the Republic cruiser Resolute as the battle for Christophsis came to an end. General Anakin Skywalker stood on the bridge, enjoying a rare moment of silence, while Captain Rex oversaw the last reports from the ground forces. The glittering, crystalline city, battered but not broken, stood as a testament to the Republic's hard-won victory. With a quiet confidence that belied her youth, Ahsoka Tano stood beside Anakin, a figure who had come out of the blue and upended their established dynamic. Her arrival had been unconventional, and the news that she was Anakin's newly assigned Padawan had caused both surprise and initial reluctance on Anakin's part. However, her performance on Christophsis, her bravery, and her quick thinking had already started to create a tentative bond between master and apprentice. Having come separately to deliver Republic reinforcements and organize the last push, Obi-Wan Kenobi stood close by. His presence calmed the bridge in contrast to Anakin's more erratic energy. Together with Captain Rex, the three of them made up a formidable, albeit newly formed, team. The Jedi Council appeared as a tiny, flickering blue hologram on the main console as the Resolute got ready to leave orbit and resume their campaign against the Separatists. A chime sounded through the bridge, indicating an incoming transmission. In sharp contrast to the recent victory, the figures of Yoda, Mace Windu, and Shak-Ti shimmered in the projection with solemn looks. Rex snapped to a sharp salute. Obi-Wan and Anakin instantly straightened, their stances changing from exhausted winners to diligent Jedi, and Ahsoka, seeing the abrupt change in mood, stood at attention, her previous composure replaced by focused readiness. "Masters," said Obi-Wan in a cool, polite voice, "we are getting ready to leave Christophsis. Is something wrong?" A ripple in the cosmic force, felt we have, strange it is, powerful, then gone, was the first thing Yoda spoke, his little figure looking even more ethereal in the hologram, his big ears twitching slightly. It was a powerful ripple, unlike anything we've encountered before, fleeting, but undeniable. "We've managed to pinpoint its approximate origin," said Mace Windu, his holographic image leaning forward as his voice carried the weight of his anxiety. "The sensing was brief, but the coordinates, they point to a sector under Separatist control, specifically, the system containing Megiddo," Shak-Ti added, her hologram figure calm despite the seriousness of her remarks. His brow wrinkled. "Megiddo? Isn't that world heavily fortified by the Separatists? We have limited intel on their defenses there." Mace Windu confirmed this with a nod from his, "Indeed, Skywalker, Megiddo is a heavily fortified world. The Separatists maintain a significant presence there, particularly around the crystalline formations which they exploit for resources. We have limited intelligence on their current defenses, particularly the number of ships guarding the planet and the extent of their ground-to-orbit batteries. Any Republic presence is met with immediate and overwhelming force. This mission requires extreme caution and a plan that accounts for their unknown, but certainly tight, security. Investigate, you must, the source of this disturbance, find, significant, it feels," Yoda said, seemingly staring into their hologram eyes. He nodded. "We understand, Masters, we will divert our course and investigate Megiddo." With a determined gleam in his eyes, Anakin said, "We'll find the source of this disturbance, Masters. Whatever the Separatists are hiding there, we'll expose it," he said, looking at Ahsoka with a small smile on his lips. "Looks like your first mission with us isn't quite over yet, Snips," he said. "Ready when you are, Sky Guy," Ahsoka said with a smile that showed her assurance. Rex's tone was firm. "We'll be ready for whatever they throw at us, generals. The 501st is prepared for a stealth insertion if necessary." The council members' holographic representations gave a nod of recognition. Yoda whispered, "The Force be with you," and then the hologram disappeared with one last flicker, leaving the bridge once again in the silent hum of the Resolute. "Set a new course for the Megiddo system, maximum speed," Obi-Wan said, turning to face the navigation officer. The officer replied, "Yes, General," entering the updated coordinates. On the way to Megiddo in hyperspace. Given their location in the Outer Rim following the battle, the journey to Megiddo would realistically take several days, likely between 3 and 5 days, depending on the specific hyperspace routes the navigators chose to minimize risk and avoid known Separatist strongholds. The Republic cruiser Resolute changed its trajectory, the streaks of hyperspace shifting as they altered course for the Megiddo system. The team used this time to plan their infiltration. The trip from Christophsis to Megiddo would take a significant amount of time, depending on the available hyperspace lanes and any detours to avoid Separatist patrols. A holographic star chart of the Megiddo system was projected onto the central table as Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex assembled in the Resolute strategy room. The map was incredibly unfinished, with significant portions denoted by question marks signifying unidentified Separatist assets. "Megiddo is a Separatist stronghold," Obi-Wan started, pointing to the limited information they have, we know they have a significant orbital presence, likely a mix of frigates and cruisers, and numerous ground-to-orbit batteries scattered across the planet. The exact number and deployment are unknown, making a direct orbital assault or a mass troop deployment suicidal. Anakin said, "So, we go in quiet, a small team, infiltration," as he leaned forward and fixed his keen gaze. "Precisely," Obi-Wan answered, "we'll transfer to a smaller, more maneuverable vessel. The Twilight is already equipped with some experimental stealth technology, though it's far from perfect. We'll need to enhance its sensor masking capabilities as much as possible." Ahsoka touched a portion of the holographic map. "We could try approaching through this asteroid field. It might provide some cover, but it'll be slow and dangerous. Separatist patrols are less frequent here, but the navigation risks are high." "Agreed," Rex stated in a realistic tone. "It's difficult to navigate an asteroid field in a stealth ship. Sensors will be pinging off debris all the time. We'll need expert piloting." He turned to Anakin. "Leave the piloting to me, Captain. I can fly anything," said Anakin with a sly smile. In order to return the conversation to the main issue, Obi-Wan interrupted, saying, "Assuming we get past the orbital defenses, their sensor net will be extensive. We'll need a carefully calculated entry vector, minimal power usage, and rely heavily on the Force to guide us through any blind spots. Once we're on the surface," Rex went on, "the terrain itself presents challenges. Mygeeto is known for its extreme cold and treacherous crystalline formations. Any ground vehicles we use will need to be specially equipped for the environment. We'll also need to be constantly on guard for Separatist ground patrols, though the likelihood of finding any in a remote area far from mining operations is lower. Our objective is reconnaissance," reminded them of, "find the source of this disturbance, assess the situation, and report back to the Council. We are not here for a planetary liberation." Ahsoka answered, "Understood, Master," with a serious expression. "We'll transfer to the Twilight before we enter the Mygeeto system's outer perimeter," Obi-Wan said. "The Resolute will remain in a holding pattern in a less heavily patrolled sector, ready to provide support if absolutely necessary, but our priority is to remain undetected." Although the strategy was dangerous and depended on a combination of experimental technology, expert piloting, Force guidance, and a fair amount of luck, it was their best option because of the uncertainty surrounding the disturbance's nature and Mygeeto's heavily guarded state. Mygeeto, infiltration at the surface. A few days later, the Twilight, a modified consular-class cruiser with a non-reflective gray-painted hull and a sensor masking system that was pushed to its limits, dropped out of hyperspace a few days later. It then started a slow, methodical approach, hugging the gravitational shadow of a nearby asteroid field and navigating the perilous outer layers of the Separatist defense grid. The journey was tense, with every flicker on the sensor screen potentially indicating a detection. The Twilight eventually broke through the atmosphere after a nerve-wracking journey, but the landing was rocky, with the ship trembling violently as it touched down amid tall crystalline formations that pierced the bruised sky. The ship was infused with Mygeeto's bitter cold, which contrasted sharply with the artificial warmth of hyperspace. The thin air carried the faint, metallic tang of the planet's resources, and the cold was a sudden, physical shock after the ship's controlled environment. The team's breath was misting as they disembarked into the cold air, and their boots crunched on the icy, crystalline ground. The landscape was both alien and beautiful, with sharp, geometric formations of ice and mineral stretching as far as the eye could see. The cold heightened the sense of loneliness and being on a world that was unfamiliar. Obi-Wan and Anakin led the way, their lightsabers ready but not ignited. They relied on the Force, stretching their senses, and felt for the lingering echoes of the disturbance. Under his breath, Obi-Wan whispered, "The energy signature. It's still here, faint, but distinct. It's coming from deeper within these formations," his voice low. "I feel it too. It's like a scar on the Force, something unnatural, and it's cold," said Anakin, nodding with his senses sharpened. "It feels, depleted now, like the Source is exhausted," he said, shivering a little in spite of his cold-weather gear. With their blasters ready and their eyes searching the alien terrain for any indication of separatist patrols they might have missed during their descent, Rex and his clones, dressed in cold-weather gear over their armor, moved with practiced efficiency, forming a defensive perimeter. The crunch of their boots on the ice and the low hum of their equipment were the only sounds to break the silence as they made their way through the maze-like crystal formations. The cold was a constant, biting presence, a stark reminder of their isolation and the harshness of this alien world. Ahsoka rubbed her arms in an attempt to ward off the chill. The landscape changed as they got closer to the disturbance's origin, led by the diminishing energy signature and an increasing sense of unease in the Force. The natural crystalline formations were replaced by remnants of industrial activity, such as blast marks on the crystals, abandoned mining equipment, and the subtle smell of ozone and lubricants. A massive, reinforced blast door was partially blown inwards, a testament to the violence that had taken place inside, and the facility hummed with a low, menacing energy. The air crackled with residual, contained power, and they discovered it carved into the side of a particularly large crystalline cliff face. The team cautiously entered the facility, which was filled with chaos, wreckage, sparks, the lingering smell of ozone, and something else, something strange and unnerving. Deactivated battle droids lay in twisted heaps, their optical sensors dark and lifeless, and the scientists, their faces frozen in shocked and disbelieving expressions, were silent and motionless, their lives snuffed out in a vicious, quick assault. A heavily damaged tactical droid lay slumped against a console, its optical sensors dark. This wasn't a standard Republic attack. The nature of the damage, the droids appear to have been destroyed with a combination of extreme heat, concussive force, and something else, something that severed them cleanly, almost surgically, but not with a lightsaber, Obi-Wan said, examining the scene with his eyes, taking in every detail. A dark, stylized mask was left on the ground close to a broken viewport, a silent testament to the violent battle that had just taken place. Anakin, his senses sharpened, felt a strong emotional echo in the Force, grief, anger, confusion, and a profound sense of loss. Something powerful was here, something other. "I can feel the emotional residue," he said as he made his way through the wreckage. The speed and precision of the attack, the droids didn't have time to react effectively. It's unlike any battle droid or even our own clone troopers in close-quarters combat I've encountered, Rex noted, highlighting tactical details as his military training kicked in. He said, "They appear to have died from blunt force trauma and something that overloaded their systems," as he examined one of the dead scientists. They followed the remnant energy trail, the same one the Council had momentarily sensed, further into the building, over broken consoles and equipment, to the shattered viewport, where the transparent glass was still falling in glittering fragments. A short way from the gaping hole where the blast door had been, the Force signature, faint but persistent, led them outside the wrecked building. The icy wind swirled around them, carrying crystalline snow, and their boots crunched on the frozen ground. A figure in black and red was huddled against the base of a large, crystalline formation that provided little protection from the wind. He was curled in on himself, his body trembling uncontrollably, not only from the cold but also from sheer exhaustion. His ragged breaths were shallow and uneven in the frigid air, and his face, which was now visible, was streaked with sweat and grime, his blue eyes squeezed shut against the harsh environment. He clutched his two short, curved blades, which were the color of polished steel but gave off a strange, subtle glow, against his chest, as if they were the only solid object in his world. The blades faintly flickered, reflecting the instability of the energy he had just passed through. It was evident that he had tried to leave the facility out of instinct and a desire to get away from the chaotic scene, but the harsh combination of his extreme fatigue, the violent dimensional transfer, and the merciless cold of Megiddo swiftly overcame him. He had only gone a few dozen meters from the entrance before he collapsed, seeking the limited cover of the crystalline rock. It was the source of the disruption, the strong force that had destroyed the separatist presence, but now it seemed exposed, almost frail, and Obi-Wan and Anakin detected his presence, a raw, exhausted energy in the force. Rex and the clones had their blasters up, their stances defensive, but they paused their fire, sensing the figure's complete tiredness and lack of instant animosity towards them. Obi-Wan approached slowly, his hand close to his lightsaber but not drawn. "He's unconscious," Rex said in a quiet voice. "He's been through something terrible," Anakin whispered, more to himself than to the others, "and he's completely drained," as he knelt a short distance away, his brow furrowed with concern. He could feel the figure's powerful but depleted life force emanating from him, as well as the overwhelming waves of grief, confusion, and exhaustion in the force. Ahsoka glanced from the strong Jedi to the apparently defenseless figure on the ground, her initial apprehension giving way to a glimmer of worry. Was this the cause of the commotion? The same force that had destroyed a separatist base? The cold seemed to be killing him. "We need to get him out of the cold, carefully. We don't know who or what he is, but he's clearly in no condition to be a threat right now," Obi-Wan said, turning to face the figure before turning back to Anakin and Rex. Rex gave a nod. "Corporal, Sergeant, with me, be ready for anything but move slow." Two clones moved slowly and non-threateningly toward the person, and when they got to him, they could see the lines of anguish around his eyes, even in unconsciousness, and the dried tears on his face. A tiny, leftover flash of energy, like a dying ember, flickered around him for a few seconds before vanishing completely as they touched him. His body was remarkably light despite his seeming power, but it was also rigid with cold. The final remnant of a burned-out world, Naruto had been discovered not in a flash of glory but just before he was about to perish in the icy emptiness of a brand-new, alien reality. His voyage through the cosmos had just taken a sharp and surprising turn. As they carefully lifted the unconscious figure, the clone troopers' ragged breaths and the crunch of their boots broke the stillness of the alien landscape. Naruto, a huddled mass of black and red against the stark white and gray, was surprisingly light, but the awkward angle and the need for speed made the task difficult. Rex, speaking in a low, urgent voice, directed his men. The icy wind of Megiddo tore at their cold-weather gear, whipping crystalline snow into their faces. "Careful with him, Corporal, Sergeant, we need to move fast, keep your eyes open for any movement." The unconscious figure they carried still had the raw, depleted power they had sensed near the facility, a low hum beneath the surface like a storm that had raged and spent itself. Obi-Wan and Anakin flanked the small group, their senses extended, feeling the faint, receding echoes of the energy disturbance and the lingering cold of the planet. "He wouldn't have lasted much longer out here," Obi-Wan said, his breath hazy, "and the cold is relentless." He felt a curious pull in the force towards the sleeping figure, a mixture of worry and the residual resonance of tremendous, raw emotion. Anakin nodded, his eyes focused on the crystal formation surrounding them. He was completely exposed. Whatever happened in that facility, it drained him dry, he said. The facility's destructive power was still vivid in Ahsoka's mind, a sharp contrast to the vulnerable figure they were now carrying. Her initial shock at the scene gave way to a focused readiness, and she moved with agile steps, her eyes scanning the dangerous ground and the tall ice structures. Their only hope of safety was the modified consular ship, a dark, angular shape against the bruised Megiddo sky. The trip back to the twilight was a tense, silent race against time and the elements, with every distant glint on a crystalline surface and every gust of wind that moved the snow feeling like a potential threat. The team moved with renewed urgency and dragged Naruto inside as the airlock locked behind them, cutting off Megiddo's biting cold. At last, the dim outline of the twilight appeared, a welcome sight in the barren terrain. The ramp fell with a gentle hiss. The artificial warmth inside the twilight stood in sharp contrast to the cold exterior. The medical bay, a small space furnished with basic Republic medical equipment, was already being set up. A sterile cot was removed, and a medical droid waited patiently with its optical sensors shining. "Corporal, Sergeant, stay on guard outside this bay. No one enters without my direct authorization or General Kenobi's," Rex said, his voice returning to its usual clear command now that they were inside. "Place him gently on the cot," he said, turning to face the two clones that had carried Naruto. "His weapons, we need to secure them immediately," Obi-Wan said as they carefully placed Naruto down. Even when he was unconscious, Naruto's hold on the two short, curved blades was surprisingly firm. The blades themselves were unlike anything they had ever seen. They were polished steel in color, but they also gave off a faint, subtle glow that seemed to come from inside the metal itself. The glow flickered slightly, reflecting the erratic nature of the energy they had just sensed. Obi-Wan said, "They feel strange," as he extended a gloved hand to sense the force rather than touch it. He sensed an odd energy emanating from them, not the usual flow of the force, but something other, something wild and confined. Rex gave a nod. "Sergeant, take possession of these, handle them with extreme caution, keep them secured in the armory until further notice, do not attempt to activate or manipulate them in any way." The sergeant, a clone with a scar across his cheek, carefully removed the blades from Naruto's grasp. His eyes widened slightly behind his visor, but he remained composed and secured the blades in a padded case. As his fingers touched the metal, the faint glow intensified for a brief moment, a soft hum vibrating through the air, before settling back down. Obi-Wan emphasized, "We don't know what these are capable of," saying, "Immediately, Captain." After securing the blades, the medical droid rolled forward, scanning Naruto's form with its optical sensors. It then beeped and whirred, followed by a synthesized voice that sounded clearly perplexed. "Analysis inconclusive. Biological structure deviates significantly from all known Republic and Separatist classifications. Vital signs irregular. Energy signatures detected, unknown." "What does that mean?" "Is he hurt?" said Anakin as he moved closer, his brow worried. "Physical trauma appears minimal, General Skywalker," the robot stated. "However, physiological exhaustion is extreme, cellular energy levels are critically low, suggest immediate administration of intravenous fluids and nutrients to stabilize." "Do it," Obi-Wan instructed, "and administer a mild anesthetic. We need to examine him without the risk of him waking up unexpectedly." After preparing an 4-line and a syringe filled with a common Republic anesthetic, the medical droid cautiously put the needle into Naruto's arm. The droid's beeping became more intense as the fluid started to flow. "Anomaly detected, administered substance, is not being processed as expected, metabolization rate, exponentially higher than standard biological organisms, anesthetic effect, minimal. Anakin, Rex, and Obi-Wan exchanged anxious looks. This was something essentially different, not just an alien species. Higher than standard? How much higher? Rex asked in a tense voice. Projection indicates full metabolization of current dosage within approximately 3.7 seconds. Subsequent doses would likely be processed with similar efficiency, rendering standard anesthetic protocols ineffective. So, we can't even knock him out to figure out what's going on. Anakin said, rubbing his hand through his hair in anger. It would appear not, General Skywalker, the robot said. His biological system is rejecting or rapidly neutralizing the substance. His body is somehow cleansing itself of the anesthetic. Remarkable and concerning, Obi-Wan said, stroking his beard while lost in concentration. Naruto's consciousness drifted in a strange, liminal space while the medical droid persisted in its fruitless attempts to control his condition using standard procedures. He became aware of the cold fading and was replaced by a dull ache and a feeling of suspension. He felt the prick in his arm and the strange liquid entering his bloodstream, but it felt fuzzy, distant. Then, the familiar scene in his memory started to take shape around him. The rusty pipes, the damp, reverberating sewers, the stifling sense of being below, and, far away, through the bars of a huge cage, Kurama's low growl and flaming red eyes. The nine tails whirling, evil energy was pressing against the seals as Naruto stood in front of the cage, but today the wrath was subdued and replaced by a tired resignation. Feeling the residual fatigue in his very being, Naruto murmured, "Kurama," in a hoarse voice. "You're awake, or at least your mind is," the fox growled, his voice resonating throughout the void. What happened? Where are we?" Naruto said as he slumped to the soggy ground and clutched his knees. When Kurama said, "We are, elsewhere, far from home," his voice was husky. "Our world, it's gone, isn't it?" Naruto felt a surge of grief, a new sting of the loss they had just experienced. Yes, consumed, there was too much power, too much hatred. The seal, it couldn't hold forever against the scale of it, not with the final attack. It wasn't just aimed at you, Kit, it was aimed at the very fabric of existence, Kurama said, pausing for a moment. "We ripped a hole, a tear between, here and there, a desperate gamble. It worked, in a way, it saved us, but it cost everything else," he said. With his entire world, his friends, and his house gone, Naruto buried his face in his hands, the weight of the loss overwhelming him. "Not because of you, Kit," Kurama replied, recognizing his state of mind, "because of them, their endless conflict, their hunger for power. You were just caught in the middle, we both were, he paused, this place, it feels different, the energy here, it's not chakra. Not like ours, anyway, but there are other energies, strange ones." Naruto experienced the subtle, alien feelings Kurama was talking about, such as the artificial hum of the spacecraft surrounding him, the lingering echoes of the force he had sensed on Maijito. With a low growl in his voice, Kurama went on, "They are trying to drug you. Weak stuff, strange liquids, and my chakra is already flushing it out." "Yeah. I felt something, fuzzy, like that time I ate those poisonous mushrooms on that C-rank mission," Naruto said with a feeble laugh, already aware of Kurama's talent. "Guess your cleaning service is still running," he said. "Naturally," sneered Kurama, with a semblance of his former haughtiness returning, "my chakra is life itself, Kit, it purifies, heals, and cleanses these chemicals, they are nothing to me, like trying to poison a river with a single drop. The bijou within him enhanced his body's natural defenses against foreign drugs, and he was automatically utilizing his chakra to digest the anesthetic. It was an instinctive reaction, a survival technique refined over years of carrying the most powerful being in his planet. Be careful, Kit, Kurama cautioned in a solemn voice. These beings, they are not like the ones we knew, powerful, perhaps, but unknown, and you are vulnerable here, exhausted. Your chakra reserves are lower than I've ever felt them. The transfer, it took a heavy toll. The Republic team returned to the medical bay and observed the confusing readings on the medical droid's monitor. Naruto was still unconscious and the anesthetic was not working, but his vital signs were gradually, almost imperceptibly, stabilizing, not from the four fluids, but from an invisible, internal process. The fluids aren't having the impact they should either, the droid said in a voice that was made to sound as like it didn't understand. Nutrient absorption is unusual, energy levels are increasing slightly, but not in a predictable pattern based on administered substances, the robot said. With his Jedi senses softly probing the unconscious figure, Obi-Wan tried to make sense of the weird energy within him. It felt layered, like a powerful, raw force that was asleep at the moment, but behind it was a sophisticated, complicated network of something else, something new and alive. With an eye on Anakin, Obi-Wan remarked, "There's something else at work here. Something the droid can't detect, a healing process, but not one I recognize." With his hand resting close to the hilt of his lightsaber, Anakin experienced the same unexplained energy. It was as though he could feel a secret spring beneath the ground, a source of force that was present but restrained at the moment. Anakin replied in a hushed voice, "He's not just an alien, he's something else entirely. Whatever he is, General, he took out that separatist facility single-handedly. We need to figure out what we're dealing with before he wakes up," Rex said, crossing his arms and staring at Naruto. Standing just behind them, Ahsoka observed the scene with astonishment and fear. This seemingly helpless comatose guy possessed a power that had destroyed a heavily defended enemy facility, and he was mending himself in ways that their technology couldn't understand. Status report, are we clear of the Mygeeto system's outer perimeter? Obi-Wan asked the navigation officer on the bridge communication system. Affirmative, General, was the reply. We've entered hyperspace, course set for the nearest secure Republic outpost, as ordered. Obi-Wan said, "Good," turning to face Naruto before turning to face Anakin and Rex. "We have a long journey ahead of us, and many questions that need answers," he said. Unbeknownst to them, the chaotic energy released on Mygeeto had reverberated well beyond the Republic's reach, reaching into the very center of the galaxy's black heart, while the twilight raced through the kaleidoscope of hyperspace, bearing its unusual passenger towards the Republic's heart. Sereno. Count Dooku stood in front of a large circular table with his hands clasped behind his back, a posture of controlled power. Across from him, a holographic projection flickered to life, revealing the shrouded form of Darth Sidious. Near Dooku, a figure knelt, her black tattoos and red skin a stark contrast to the darkness. The air in the hidden chamber was thick with the oppressive weight of the dark side. Ancient symbols etched into the obsidian walls appeared to writhe in the dim light. "The disturbance on Mygeeto, what do we know?" Sidious said in a low, rasping whisper that seemed to slither across the atmosphere. Dooku said, "Master, we received a fragmented report from Dr. Vex on Mygeeto. The dimensional breach was successful. They brought something through, with a small head tilt that conveyed respect and a faint undertone of his own authority." "Successful? Good, what is it?" Sidious's holographic form emitted a subtle hum of curiosity. Dooku's look was one of cautious curiosity. That is where the report became unclear. Master, the energy signature was anomalous, unlike anything we predicted. Dr. Vex reported a unforeseen energy signature and a desynchronization of protocols, then chaos. The transmission was interrupted by the sounds of intense struggle, weapons fire, explosions, and a singular, powerful energy burst, followed by silence, he said, pausing as he recalled the icy, cut-off message. A single powerful energy burst, and then silence. The facility is gone, then? Sidious said, standing silent for a long time as the darkness in the chamber became heavier and the force surrounding him appeared to coil tighter, like a predator sensing prey. All contact has been lost, Master, Dooku stated. Our deep-range sensors detected a massive, localized energy surge on the planet's surface shortly after the transmission cut off. The facility was leveled, utterly destroyed. With a low, menacing growl, Sidious asked, destroyed by what? The Republic? Unlikely, Master, Dooku said with a sigh. The energy signature was not consistent with Republic weaponry, and the timing. It occurred immediately after Dr. Vex reported bringing something through the dimensional rift. With her gaze focused on the virtual Sidious, Talon said, something came through the rift, Master, and destroyed the facility, a powerful anomaly, in a deep, guttural purr. An anomaly indeed, a being capable of such destruction, appearing through a dimensional breach. This is not a random event, this is a variable we cannot afford to ignore, Sidious said, his head cocked slightly inside his hood. He returned his attention to Dooku. Find me everything you can about this facility, Lord Tyrannus, every scrap of data, every report, and more importantly, locate the source of this anomaly, this being that Dr. Vex brought through. Our orbital sensors detected a faint energy residue on the surface after the destruction, Dooku stated. It matches the signature reported by Dr. Vex just before the transmission was lost. It appears the anomaly is still on Mygeeto. Still on Mygeeto, good, this being. If he is indeed the source of such power, he represents an opportunity, or a threat. We must ascertain which, Sidious said in a quiet, reflective hum that was flavored with evil purpose. If this power can be controlled, he will be a valuable asset. If not, he must be eliminated before he can disrupt our plans, he said, pausing as the dark chamber fell silent. As you command, Master, Dooku answered firmly. I will lead the search, Master, I will find this anomaly, Talon said as she got up from her kneeling position, her red eyes shining in the low light. With a little movement inside the shroud, Sidious' holographic form appeared to nod. Good, Talon, your skills will be useful in this pursuit, do not fail me, the voice said. Dooku turned to his apprentice with a cunning expression in his eyes as the holographic representation flickered and disappeared, leaving him and Talon in the stifling solitude of the Sith sanctuary. This is a matter of great importance, Talon, Dooku remarked in a low voice. This individual, he may be the key to a power that could shatter the Republic and usher in a new era, or he may be a threat that must be neutralized before he can be understood. Either way, he is now our priority. He will be found, Master, and his power will belong to the Sith, Talon said with a sly smile that gleamed in the faint light. A new, unpredictable force had just taken over the galaxy, which was already on the verge of collapse. The Sith, who are constantly vying for dominance, had their sights set on the gullible Uzumaki Naruto. Within the medical bay's sterile confines, the low hum of the Twilight's hyperdrive was a constant, almost calming presence. Outside the reinforced door, Corporal Grit and Sergeant Kaiser of the 501st stood calmly, their DC-15A blaster rifles held loosely, but their senses sharp. Hours had passed since they had brought the enigmatic figure aboard, and the quiet of hyperspace provided a brief break from the constant stress of war. Captain Rex gave them clear instructions: guard the door, report any changes in the patient's condition, and prevent anyone from entering without his or General Kenobi's express permission. Naruto Uzumaki lay on the cot, seemingly unconscious, the four-line thin, alien tether in his arm. His face, though cleared of the worst of the grime, still wore the marks of exhaustion and a deep, almost palpable grief. Inside, the medical droid continued its silent, perplexing work, its beeps and whirs the only sounds, a stark contrast to the raging blizzard of Maijito they had left behind. The silence was abruptly shattered by a succession of quick, weird beeps coming from the medical droid, followed by an odd, nearly mechanical clatter. The clones looked at each other. Grit whispered, adjusting his weight, "What was that?" "Something's happening in there," Kaiser said, bringing his hand closer to his blaster. "Sounded like the droid," he said. The voice then emerged, not the medical droid's synthesized tones nor the Republic crew's well-known basic, but piercing, guttural, and wholly unfamiliar, shouting, loud, fast, and full of an unfathomable raw anger. Grit's voice was tense as she asked, "Did you hear that?" Kaiser's posture changed from comfortable to prepared. "Yeah, that's not basic," he acknowledged. "And it's not separatist chatter either. What in the blazes?" The droid's beeping got frenetic, a high-pitched whine joining the alien cries, and there was more yelling interspersed with what sounded like a struggle. "He's awake," Kaiser said in a somber tone, "and he's not happy." Kaiser reached for the door release, his gaze fixed on the slender window as their training took over and they moved in tandem, their blasters raised, their actions perfect and controlled. With a calm, deep voice, he whispered, "On my mark, open and assess, be ready for anything." He had somehow incapacitated the medical droid, with its mechanical arms hanging limply and its optical sensors dark. He had a grip on one of its arms, holding it like a shield, his body tense and ready. The scene inside the medical bay was startling as the door hissed open and Naruto was no longer lying on the cot. He was on his feet, disoriented but alert, with a fierce, wild look in his eyes. His voice was raw and full of fear, perplexity, and rage as he yelled, "Where am I? What is this, and who are you?" A fury of rapid-fire Japanese. A medical droid was being held captive by an alien entity speaking an unidentified language, and Grit and Kaiser paused in the doorway, their blasters ready but not shooting. They had been trained for innumerable combat scenarios, but this was unlike anything they had ever experienced. "Whoa, whoa, take it easy," Grit replied, trying to sound cool despite the obvious stress. He raised his hands slightly, which is a common de-escalation signal. The stance, the raised weapons, the cautious looks behind the visors, and the additional enemies were all familiar to Naruto, even though he didn't understand the words. His grip on the droid tightened, and a tiny, nearly undetectable ripple of chakra ran through his arm, giving anyone who touched the droid a weird vibration. The medical unit was an essential piece of equipment in any conflict he knew, disabling it would weaken his opponents. He yelled again. "Stay back," his eyes darting between the two clones, evaluating their movements, their potential threats. Despite the lingering exhaustion, his mind was racing, analyzing the situation with a surprising clarity, a flicker of his tactical mind amidst the panic. A pragmatic, almost cold calculation, a touch of his shinobi life influence guided his actions. Captain Rex, This is Sergeant Kaiser, Medical Bay. The patient is awake and hostile. He's got the medical droid, unknown language, requesting immediate assistance. Generals too, if they're available, Kaiser said, bringing his communication device to his lips in recognition of the dire situation and the perplexing nature of the situation. Understood, Sergeant, we're on our way. Hold your position. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary, Rex said sharply after a brief period of static. Kaiser said, copy that, Captain, keeping his gaze fixed on Naruto. The two clones, confused but disciplined, held their position, their blasters steady, waiting for backup. The alien yelling continued, a desperate, incomprehensible plea in a void of misunderstanding. Naruto, exhausted but determined, held his ground, the disabled droid, his only shield. The tension in the medical bay was thick enough to cut with a lightsaber. Soon after, the sound of rushed footsteps reverberated down the hallway, and Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and Rex arrived. As they took in the scene, their expressions changed from urgency to confusion. With his eyes scanning the hospital bay, Rex questioned, "What's going on here?" Kaiser pointed to Naruto with his blaster and said, "He's awake, sir. He's got the droid, speaking, something alien, we can't understand him." The disabled medical droid was an odd, unexpected element in the standoff. Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka entered the medical area with their lightsabers still connected to their belts but their hands close to the hilts. They saw Naruto, his posture rigid, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and defiance. Obi-Wan held out a hand in a soothing gesture and said, "Easy there, we're not going to hurt you," in a soft basic voice, but Naruto didn't understand a word. He tightened his hold on the droid, prepared to defend himself, and his face, smeared with sweat and grime, held a deep sadness that went deeper than the current fear, a lingering echo of survivor's guilt. Naruto's eyes narrowed, more of them, and they were speaking, but he couldn't understand a word. Their stances were less overtly hostile than the clones, but their presence, their strange energy, felt powerful. "What is he doing? Why the droid?" Anakin asked, his face displaying a mix of worry and annoyance. "He sees it as either a weapon or a tool," Obi-Wan whispered, his Jedi senses cautiously reaching out. He sensed the chaos of the dimensional transfer, the raw power within Naruto, and beneath it, a jumble of strong emotions, including fear, confusion, grief, and determination. However, his mind was a fortress, or perhaps just too foreign to fully penetrate with the Force. "He's acting on instinct, he thinks we're enemies," Obi-Wan said. Obi-Wan chose to try a more direct method utilizing the Force after realizing the pointlessness of verbal communication. He used his senses to try to project a sense of calm, assurance, and a non-threatening presence into Naruto's head. He experienced a sharp, startling recoil as his Force presence approached Naruto's mind. It felt wrong, alien, and hostile, not in intent, but in nature, like striking a wall composed of unbridled, pure energy that crackled and sparked in the face of the Force, rather than pushing against a closed door or a mind impervious to influence. Obi-Wan's focus was forced to lapse as a sudden, disagreeable feeling jolted through his head. He flinched back, letting out a quiet moan, and his palm automatically went to his temple. The same jolt hit Anakin as he tried a similar, possibly more strong, projection of calm. He stumbled back a step and grimaced, saying, "Arg. What was that? It's like static. Pure, raw energy." He scratched his temples, the uncomfortable feeling lasting. Even though Ahsoka was less experienced, she experienced the same strong, chaotic surge that felt like a storm raging in Naruto's head, amplified by the barrier it created. "Master, that felt wrong, like being struck by lightning, but inside my head," she said, stammering back with her hand over her chest and her breath caught in her throat. "Humph, trying to cloud the kid's mind, are they? Foolish, my chakra is a shield against such trickery." Kurama's massive form shifted from within the seal. The Nine Tails had sensed the Jedi's attempt to influence Naruto's thoughts, and using his extensive knowledge of genjutsu and mental manipulation, his protective instincts had automatically kicked in. He had unleashed a burst of raw, unrefined chakra into Naruto's mind, not to harm the Jedi but to forcefully repel their foreign energy. It was a shield of pure, volatile power, completely alien to the subtle currents of the Force. Sensing the Jedi's attempt and their subsequent retreat, Naruto mistook it for a failed attack and an indication of their animosity. His fear increased, and he screamed, "Don't come any closer," his voice cracking with strain. He tightened his hold on the medical droid, causing a tiny, visible ripple of chakra to flow over his arm, causing the droid to emit a faint, high-pitched whine. Rex realized they were out of alternatives as he saw the Jedi's agonized emotions and the mounting stress. The Resolute was becoming nearer, the Force wasn't functioning, and verbal communication was impossible. Rex looked at the two clones in the doorway, their blasters still aimed, their faces marked with uncertainty. "Generals," he said in an urgent, clipped voice, "the methods aren't working, we need a different approach, we're almost at the Resolute, we can't dock with him like this. A non-lethal takedown would be extremely dangerous, risking injury to Naruto and possibly the loss of the medical droid." "You're right, Captain, we need to secure him before we dock," Obi-Wan said with a sad nod after he had recovered from the mental shock. He glanced at Anakin and then at Ahsoka. The pure power they had just experienced and the impenetrable mental shield, this was far more complicated than they had expected. "So, what do we do? Try to stun him?" "We don't even know if that will work on him," Anakin said, looking at Naruto while continuing to shake his head slightly in disgust. "He's exhausted," Ahsoka whispered, more to herself than to the others, as she observed Naruto's tense body, the desperation in his eyes, and the raw energy pulsing beneath his skin. Completely drained, she recalled the sensation of his life force on Maijito, the terrible depletion, the situation's immense stress, the alien surroundings, the unfathomable creatures, the lingering trauma of his world's destruction, the physical exhaustion from the dimensional transfer, and the unintentional effort of Kurama's chakra shielding his mind, finally caught up with Naruto, as if her words were a trigger. His eyes, which had been wide with panic minutes before, started to flutter shut, his hold on the medical droid relaxed, his body rocked, and he felt a tremble that had nothing to do with the cold. He let forth a low moan, a sound of utter, unadulterated tiredness. Ugh. He collapsed to the ground, letting go of the medical droid with a clatter. His body struck the deck with a dull thud, and his breathing became ragged and shallow again. He was unconscious. The Republic team stared, their blasters still raised, their lightsabers still unignited, the sudden silence in the medical bay broken only by the ship's hum and the beeping of the now-released medical droid, which started to cycle through diagnostics. The standoff ended not because of their actions but rather because of the physical collapse of their unidentified enemy. Rex said needlessly, "He's unconscious," lowering his pistol a little. The chaotic energy was still present but dormant now, a quiet thrum beneath the surface. Obi-Wan and Anakin approached the fallen figure gingerly, their force senses gently probing. The profound fatigue was evident, a heavy weight in the force. Obi-Wan commanded, "Secure him," his voice still a little startled. "Restrain him, but be careful, we still don't know what we're dealing with," he said. "All right, secure him, use binders, but double-check them, we can't afford any surprises," Rex said to the two clones. With a professional focus replacing their initial apprehension, Grit and Kaiser approached Naruto's comatose form with caution. They swiftly and effectively bound him in binders, their moves precise and practiced. "Bridge to Medical Bay, we are entering docking pattern with the Resolute now," the ship's intercom sounded as they were done. They had a strong, alien creature that could repel the Force and speak an unidentified language, and they were about to take him on board their flagship. Obi-Wan glanced at Anakin as they held a silent conversation filled with worries and unresolved questions. "Medical droid, report his condition," Obi-Wan said, turning to face the medical droid, which was now standing and performing a thorough system check. According to the droid's voice-generated, patient vital signs, critically low, energy levels, severely depleted, recommending immediate transfer to advanced medical facilities. "General, we need to inform the Resolute," Rex said as he moved closer, his eyes focused on the viewports where the Resolute loomed. "Bridge, this is General Kenobi in the medical bay," Obi-Wan said, nodding as he switched to the medical droid's interface and accessed the ship's communications. The voice of the pilot answered, "Go ahead, General. Inform the Resolute's bridge immediately," Obi-Wan said in a grave voice. "We are bringing aboard an unknown, non-Republic, non-separatist entity. He is currently unconscious and secured, but we have reason to believe he is incredibly powerful and potentially volatile. Request a secure holding area and medical personnel with experience in xenobiology, if possible. Emphasize the unusual nature of our passenger, be concise, but make sure they understand the gravity of the situation." The pilot replied, "Copy that, General," his tone now slightly worried. Uzumaki Naruto's arrival was not limited to a barren, icy planet. It was about to become a problem for the entire fleet. The twilight glided smoothly towards the Resolute's waiting docking bay, a small ship carrying a monumental secret. A message was about to be received on the flagship's bridge that would send shockwaves of confusion and concern through the Republic.